Hey everybody. So I want to welcome you here we're going to talk about foundations of American government here. So if you'll notice, I'm using a program called Screencastify-O-Matic that I actually started using last year when we had to go virtual, and I like it pretty good. So what you'll be able to do is see what's on my screen, and you'll be able to follow along with the PowerPoints and such. So you can go ahead and get your notes out right now. It's those fill in the blank study guides that you had gotten at registration. If you didn't get those, I do have them posted on Google Classroom that you can download and print. Or if you'd rather do them on Google Docs, you can do that as well. I think it would be easier for me to write them down just because, that's, again, a lot of the feedback that I got from my students last year. But whatever you want to do, whatever makes it work, however you get them copied down is fine with me. So in Foundations of American Government, basically this is the background of government, so to speak. So we're going to talk about a little bit of some comparative political systems and some of the history that's behind it. Really, the meat and potatoes of this class is when we're going to start in the next unit, which is the Constitution. And then later on, we'll get into the different branches of government, state governments, that kind of stuff. Also, you're going to see a video here that I'm going to play for you from Crash Course Government. A lot of y'all are probably used to John Green. We got a guy named Craig. He's not nearly as funny as John Green, but he does have some really good stuff. And then later on, we'll actually start using some of those videos to do some ed puzzles. So anyhow, let's go ahead and get started here. And we'll talk about the foundations of American government. Of course, the first lesson is what is government? And I want to play a short little video.
Hi, I'm Craig. I'm not John Green, but I do have patches on my elbows so I seem smart. And this is Crash Course Government and Politics, a new show. Hooray! Why are fireworks legal or illegal? We might find out. Will we find out, Stan? Anyway, I have a question for you. Have you ever wondered where your tax dollars go, or why people complain about it so much? Or who pays for the highway that runs past your house? Or why you use the textbooks you use in science class? Or why you need a license to drive, or to hunt, or to fish, or to become a barber? I've always wanted to cut my own hair. Back when I had it. Have you ever wondered why you have to be 21 years old to drink alcohol, but only 18 to vote or gamble? Sometimes voting is a gamble. Actually, always. Do you get confused when you hear people on the news talk about Wall Street regulations, or Obamacare, or the national debt? Do you wonder why there are so few cell phone carriers and cable companies? How about why it's okay for student groups to lead prayers in schools, but not for the principal to do so? Have you ever wondered if there are any limits on when, where, and how the police can search your home, or your car, or your locker, or you, or your friend, or your grandma? Or your grandma's friend. And do you know why you can stand outside of a government office with a sign and a bullhorn complaining about military action that you think is unfair and the police can't stop you, but you can be fired from your job for doing the exact same thing? Have you ever been sued or fined? Ever wonder what the difference is between being sued or being fined? Have you ever wondered why our government does the things it does and doesn't do other things? Have you ever wondered what it would be like if we had no government at all? That would be anarchy. Can we play the Sex Pistols, Stan? That's probably illegal. Why is it illegal? And probably most important, have you ever thought about how you can change the things that seem unjust or unfair or that you just don't like? Okay, so that was more than one question, and obviously there isn't a single answer to all of those questions, except that, in a way, there is. The study of government and politics. And that's what we're going to talk about today, and this whole series, Crash Course Government and Politics. Aptly titled. So let's start by doing what human beings do when confronted with complicated questions they can't answer. We'll answer a simpler one. In this case, what are government and politics, and why do I need to learn about them? Government is a set of rules and institutions people set up so that they can function together as a unified society. Sometimes we call this a state, or a nation, or a country, or Guam, and I'll use these terms somewhat interchangeably, except for Guam. That might be a little confusing. So, we study government in order to become better citizens. Studying government enables us to participate in an informed way. Anyone can participate, but doing so intelligently, that takes a little effort, and that's why we need to learn about how our government works. Politics is a little different. Politics is a term we use to describe how power is distributed in a government, and in the US, it basically describes the decisions about who holds office and how individuals and groups make those decisions. Following politics is a lot like following sports in that there's a winner and a loser, and people spend a lot of time predicting who will win and analyzing why the winner won and the loser lost. The outcome of an election might affect your life more than the outcome of a sports game, though, unless you're gambling. which might be illegal. Government is really important. Everyone born in America is automatically a citizen, and many people choose to become citizens every year so that they can have a say in the government. The USA is a republic, which means that we elect representatives to govern us, and a democracy, which means that citizens are allowed to participate. This ability to participate is something we take for granted, but we shouldn't. History tells us that citizen participation is the exception rather than the rule, but we're not going to look at history. Who has time? That's what history courses are for with that other guy. So one way people can participate in government is through voting, and many people will tell you that that's pretty much the only way we can participate in government or politics, but they're wrong, and I love pointing out when people are wrong. Let's go to the thought bubble. Sure, when you mark a ballot, you are participating in the political process, but there are so many other things you can do to be an active citizen. You can contact your representatives and tell them what you think about a political issue. People used to do this by writing letters or sending telegrams, but now they tend to call or send email, although there's nothing like a good old-fashioned angry letter. People can work for campaigns or raise money or give money. They can display yard signs or bumper stickers. They can canvass likely voters, try to convince them to vote, or even drive them to the polls on election day. You participate in politics when you answer a public opinion poll, or when you write a letter to the editor or comment on an online article. You participate in politics when you blog or tumble or make a YouTube video or tweet. I guess even YouTube comments count. First, ever been to a march or a rally, or held a sign, or worn a t-shirt with a slogan on it, or discussed an upcoming election at the dinner table and tried to convince your parents who to vote for? You've participated in the political process. And if you've actually run for office, you've participated, even if you didn't win. And if you did win, congratulations! Now get back to work. You should already know this. But probably the most important thing you can do to participate in government and politics is both the easiest and the most challenging. Become more educated. Anyone can be a citizen, but to be a good citizen requires an understanding of how the government works and how we can participate. It requires knowledge and effort, and we have to do it because otherwise we end up being led rather than being leaders. We learn about politics because knowledge is our best defense against unscrupulous people who will use our ignorance to get us to do the things that they want rather than what we think should be done. Thanks, Thought Bubble. That was my first Thought Bubble narration. Hooray! You guys are fun. This is fun. So that's where we come in. Over the course of this series, we will be looking in depth at American government and politics. We'll be talking about stuff like the structure and function of the branches of government, the division of power between the national government and the state governments, what political parties are, what they do, and how they are different from interest groups. We'll examine the role the media plays in government and politics, how the legal system and the courts work, and how they protect civil rights and civil liberties. We'll look at political ideologies, what it means to say you're a liberal, or a conservative, or a libertarian, or a socialist, or an anarchist. Okay, we probably won't talk about anarchy because that's sort of the rejection of government. Again, Sex Pistols? Can't. It's a copyright issue. I'll take care of it. Anarchy! Woo! I've been known to do that from time to time. We'll try to understand the forces that are shaping American government and politics today, and we'll work towards becoming more involved and developing our knowledge so that we make our government more responsive and our politics more inclusive. By the end of the series, and actually before the end, you will understand how our government works and how you can make it work better for you and your community. Not only will you be able to answer most of the questions I started this episode with, but you will become, if you pay attention and think for yourself, a more engaged and active citizen. And you might have a beard. If you don't shave. Next week, we'll talk about Congress, how it works, and what it does when it does anything. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next week. And that's my first Crash Course episode. Are we out of poppers, Stan? Wait, I'll just throw them. Woo-hoo!
I know you learned last year that he was the father of the Constitution, and we'll go into more depth with that when we get into the next unit. And of course, it's the idea that if everybody was good, we wouldn't need any laws. And especially, y'all, this is playing out. If you're watching the news and you see like these Antifa groups who are going through and they're just busting up and going in and there's a difference between protesting peacefully and then there's a difference between going in and just tearing stuff up and stealing things. And so it's the idea that if everybody was good, we wouldn't need a government. So what is government? Government is the institution through which a society makes and enforces its public policies, which are basically all of the things that a government decides to do. Imagine if we had no government. We talked about being anarchy, but imagine the chaos of having no laws, having no police. And y'all look, again, this is a great time to study government because there are places in Seattle, Washington, and Portland, Oregon, and even Minneapolis, Minnesota, they're talking about defunding the police because of everything that's going on. We can get into that later on, but I mean, can you imagine not having a police force? Can you imagine the chaos? And we're starting to see some of that unravel right now, which is absolutely just mind-blowing. So anyhow, government is the institution through which a society makes and enforces its public policies. So what are the main functions of government? Well, to ensure security, okay? And you can see military man right there, to make sure that we are a secure nation. To maintain order. Again, we talk about the police, and again, there's these debates that are going on today about what to do with these police forces. To resolve conflict, so you can go through the court system, and we'll talk later on when we get into the Constitution about the Fifth and Sixth and Seventh Amendments and how that affects you in a court of law. Provide services. You can see school buses, and I can't wait to see those things get fired up and bring you all back to school. And I really miss you all, and really am looking forward to being in person with you. And then also to provide for the public good. So all governments exercise three types of powers. There's legislative power, which is to make the law. There's executive power, which executes or carries out the law. And then there's judicial power, which interprets the law, or I like to say judges the law. So your legislative power makes the laws. That's your legislative branch, your Congress, your Virginia House of Delegates and State Senate. Your executive power is your president, really, that executes and carries that out. And then again, your judicial branch interprets it or basically judges it. Think about that in the way that the judicial branch, people who make up the judicial branch are judges. They look at the law to see if it is fair or not. And then you look here, there's Congress. They're the ones that make the laws. And you can see this here on your chart in your notes. The president enforces the laws, and then the Supreme Court, and then also your other federal courts, they interpret the law as well. And again, we'll go into more depth later on when we get into each branch of government as we get later on into the unit or the year. The dominant political unit in the world is called the state. So even though we think about the state of Virginia, let's say, we're talking about a state here as far as a nation or as a political unit here. So what do you have to have a state? Well, you have to have population. People have to live there, okay? You have to have territory in order to have a state. You have to have a government. So you have to have people making decisions and making laws. And then you have to have sovereignty. And you may remember from U.S. history something called popular sovereignty. It's actually one of the 6 principles of the Constitution, which basically means we the people rule. So sovereignty means you have the authority to rule. I could sit here and say when you guys come back that I'm going to call my classroom Baileyville and you all have to pay me a tax. So you have to give me $1 that you come in. Well, I can call it Baileyville till I'm blue in the face, but the state of Virginia, the United States, is not going to recognize that as a sovereign idea, and they'll probably take me off, in a straitjacket. So anyhow, sovereignty simply is the supreme and absolute power within a territory. And again, you can see right here on this little chart here the 4 characteristics of the state. So why is Virginia not a state in the international sense of the word? Well, we do not have absolute sovereignty, okay? And later on, we'll get into, when we talk about, back in the day with the Articles of Confederation and such, we can't declare war on Finland. We can't coin Virginia dollars, that type of thing. So talking about some of the history here, what are the origins of the state? So how did the state start? What are some of the different theories? Well, the first theory is called the force theory. And simply put, it's the idea that might makes right. And it's the idea that one person or a small group of people forcibly claim and control an area, and they force submission. So they just go through, when you look back, in world history, and you see where, the barbarians would come through and just take land or just take over. Yeah, that's part of the force theory. The evolutionary theory is developed from the family, that one person is the head of the family. So it evolves, okay? The next one is the divine right theory. There are some places that are called theocracies. Iran is one of those. And even if you go back into world history and talk about the Egyptians, and their god kings and their pharaohs, or even you could even go back to, in times of the monarchies, where it's the idea that God wants me to rule, that I have the authority from God to rule. That's the divine right theory. And then you have your social contract theory. And this comes from John Locke, who was an Enlightenment philosopher who talked about an agreement between the government and the governed to provide protection and support with the consent of the governed. What makes this so unique is the idea that the people can rule. This right here is the formation of democracy. And so it's the idea that we enter into a social contract that we will follow the laws, okay? And in return, by us following the laws, we should be able to make those laws. So there's a little bit of give and take there. It's a contract. Think about that. When you write a contract with somebody, it's an agreement between two parties. So it's the idea that we, the people, should rule ourselves, but in return, we're not going to act like a bunch of idiots and screw that up. The purpose of government, and this is what we'll finish up with for today. Why do we have government? And this goes into our preamble. So first of all, is to form a more perfect union. A strong union equals a strong nation. Even Abraham Lincoln, as great as a president as he was so consumed on keeping the Union together in the Civil War that he was going to allow the South to keep their slaves. So it's the idea that we need to be together. Okay, a strong union equals a strong nation. The next one is to establish justice, to make sure that laws are reasonable and that they're fair. That's why you're seeing so many people right now, especially with Black Lives Matter, who are talking about how they feel that laws are not fair towards African Americans or other peoples of color. And then you have other people who say that's a bunch of bunk. And again, that's the whole thing about politics and the dialogue we can have there. But to establish justice. The next one is to ensure domestic tranquility. So the word domestic means home. If you domesticate an animal, you train them to keep them at home. So we want to maintain order here at home. And again, hey, that is a problem that Donald Trump has right now, because when you see, like, for example, in Seattle, there were a group of people in Antifa that actually took over a block of the city and called it an autonomous zone, basically meaning that they're not part of the United States. So really, that was the responsibility of the mayor of Seattle and even the governor of Washington to go in. But does Donald Trump actually go in and take federal troops? I think if it had gotten a lot worse, he could have done that and would have been justified to do that under this ensuring domestic tranquility. Provide for the common defense. That's your military. Defend against foreign enemies. To promote the general welfare. So not necessarily welfare as far as welfare programs we think of today, such as maybe the AFDC or the SNAP programs or food stamps, but the idea that we want to provide services so you get a free and public education. We want to make sure that you have clean air and water and public utilities. So we want to promote the general welfare. And then the last one is to secure the blessings of liberty. Let me to do that. So to guarantee our rights and our liberties. And again, when we get into the judicial branch, we'll talk a lot about things you can and can't do and what the Supreme Court has said about that. So that finishes up lesson 1, and we will see you guys later on. Thanks.